Just a couple of disclosures, as Rena mentioned, I do work for the AMA, for APCO and the MBME, and I'm a PI on the grant that I'm going to be discussing, but the opinions reflected in this presentation are my own and do not necessarily represent those organizations. What I hope to accomplish today is I'm going to summarize some of the innovations that are happening in the UME to GME transition and talk about what the signaling effects have been on residency application, especially now that we're right in the middle of the cycle or beginning of the cycle. There's a lot happening there. And then I'm going to talk to you about the new OBGYN residency application process and why did OBGYN decide to do that. I don't know how many of you in this room know what this is. You have to be probably my age or older to know, but this was how things used to come in the past, as this is not even a fax, this is a telegram. And this is how I received when I matched. And it's interesting because I remember when I applied for residency, I only applied to 5 places. I only ranked 2. I don't know where my student affairs dean was that they let me do this, but we know we're in a very different space today. And I've been working with students over all those years, and I've seen a lot change. And this is kind of what inspired me to really actually start working in this area. And as we know, the UME to GME transition is full of challenges, right? So there's a lot happening around residency selection. It used to be in the past whether I'm going to match up my number 1 or my number 2. It's very different today. There's equity issues, there's well-being issues, there's readiness. We're talking about CBME, there's diversity issues, and there's this transparency between UME and GME. And if we really think about current student priorities today, is because we use normative grading, the students from day one, I mean, I actually like shocked. Sometimes I meet a first-year medical student whose their goal is, how do I get the best grades, the best step score, so I can get into the best residency program? And I always have to say, there's no such thing as a best residency program. There's what is the best program for you. But also, I've also heard program directors say, I want the best applicant. I'm like, who is the best applicant? What constitutes the best applicant? But we created this system where there's a lot of focus on that students are more focused on grades than they are focused on how do I be the best doctor I can be. And that has all been driven by residency selection, because it's become, as we're going to go through, it's become a lot more competitive in certain specialties, I should say. I think it is really important to clarify that at this point, there are more residency slots per USMD applicant than there ever been, but it's where applicants want to go. That's why we hear of the competitiveness. And then obviously that brings a lot of equity and diversity issues with it. And this is a slide that I always show, and people are shocked sometimes when they see it. In 2023, UAS 2023, the average US graduate applied to 78 programs. And the average IMG applied to 144. These usually the data has been tracked by specialty, and this was the last time I saw the numbers. And we're going to talk, they may be decreased a little bit today, but not by much. And I call the UME to GME transition a wicked problem. And, first when I got introduced to wicked problem, I thought it was just a term, but really it's not just a term. There is actually a definition for a wicked problem. And wicked problems are problems that are very complex to solve. Their roots are complex and tangled. There's different values and priorities for the stakeholders. And oftentimes the people who created the problems are trying to solve it. And it's really hard if you create the problem and you have a conflict of interest and you're trying to solve it. So it is very difficult to solve a wicked problem. However, there are ways that you could potentially do that, is by actually following certain steps. First, you have to have a clear vision of what a successful outcome is. What is it that we're seeking? And then you need to research and understand the wicked problems from all angles and stakeholders' perspective, and use values to come to possible solutions. I'm going to come back to values all the time. It is really important to have values and to follow what those values are. But most important, you have to experiment with actions. And this is where I'm going to talk a lot about the work that we've done in OBGYN, because experimentation is really important. And like Rena mentioned, I am the PI on a grant that we were lucky to get from the AMA in 2020, which we often use the right resident, right program ready day one, is how do we actually get the right resident to go to the right program, not the best resident, best program, and how do we make sure that they're actually ready on their first day of residency? And the goals of that grant was twofold. One is to optimize the alignment between interested applicants and potential programs through the application match process. And the other part is provide incoming PGY1 residents with professional development to ensure that they are ready on day one of residency. And we, from day one, we put our principles and values that we want to be applicant-centered with improvement for all stakeholders. We want to make sure to keep diversity in mind. Equity comes at the center of everything. And we wanted to make the transition efficient for everybody. And obviously, we have to take into account the well-being. And I tell you, those principles and values were very important because anytime we're going to do something different or we're exploring, we put those up and we look at them as a team and say, you know what, we need to stay focused on this. And you know, I'm one individual presenting on behalf of a specialty, and I will tell you that there are probably about 200 people around the country that are involved in this work. And I always say only 4 of us get paid. So to get that many people to volunteer to do all this work, that tells you that actually this is something of importance to all these people, because people don't, you know, people are busy. It is really hard to give your time, but we have so many people who are so committed to making this better because we're all suffering from what's happening. So we were able to unify the OBGYN specialty by working across the UME to GME transition. We successfully implemented standards for the OB/GYN application interview process. We introduced additional tools for the holistic review. We implemented program signaling. We implemented a readiness curriculum and a coaching curriculum. And I'm going to talk about these briefly, each of them. If you're familiar with the standards for OB/GYN application or the interview process, when we look at them now, we look back, we say, we can't believe we did it any differently. You know, we actually have set a deadline for applicants by which we want to have their applications. The reason we did that is because we quickly discovered that applicants towards end of October, if they don't have enough interviews, they go and start applying. And it is expensive to apply. And we also learned that our program director never looks at their applications. So it's not fair to have someone apply when you're not looking at their application. So we said you have to have your application by that date. And then we did the interview release offer on the same date because I don't know about your students, but you know, there's still specialties that are scattered when they offer interviews. I don't think students can be in clinical rotations. They don't want to scrub in the OR. They don't want to be doing anything else because they're waiting for that interview. And I tell you my own anecdote with this, my daughter who was applying into anesthesia residency at the time when she was applying, and I don't know if they changed that now. This was 4 years ago. They still had, they don't have a universal offer interview date. So she had an interview and she was going to be doing that virtual interview for about 2 hours. So she was like, Mom, I need you to watch my all my electronics to see if I'm going to get an interview offer, because you have to accept it right away. And if you don't accept it, you might lose it. So she signed everything. She signed all her accounts to me. And there's, you know, through ERAS, through Thalamus, her email and everything. And she said, if I get an interview, you have to immediately go. I said, no problem. And, you know, and I'm technology savvy. I know how to do this. So, and then she gets an interview offer from University of Chicago, which she really liked the program. And I go to actually do it for her, and the spot was gone. And I literally was there in less than a minute. And I'm like, oh my God, I failed my own daughter. She ended up matching at Michigan, which was fine. But I cannot imagine being an applicant who is stressing over scheduling an interview, and they get an interview offer and they go, because a lot of these programs actually offer interviews more than they have slots, which is also not fair. Like, why it's not, you're not the airline where you're overbooking people and you can give them money to give up their seats. But this still happens. Hopefully it's happening less today, because there have been some guidelines, including from the NRMP, to say that you should not be doing that. And then we also gave our applicants minimum 48 hours to accept or decline the offer, so they have time to sit and think about it, and also to let them know of the final status. And during COVID, obviously, we did virtual interviews for all applicants. And I am very proud to say that our specialty has indefinitely, for now, committed to virtual interviews, because we found that there's no difference in outcomes with virtual interviews, and it's more equitable, because it's like not everyone can travel to the interview site. And our specialty every year comes out and say we continue to do virtual interviews. And the other thing is we study everything we do, because one of the things, and when we said we want to offer a single interview date, people were like, you know, you're going to get those people hold interviews. They're not going to, the interviews are not going to be distributed. We actually studied that, and we found that actually if you have a standardized interview offer date, applicants are much less likely to hoard interviews. And we also, the same with the virtual interviews, the number did not really change doing virtual interviews versus in-person interviews, because people are like, oh, now that virtual interviews, people are going to be doing 20 and 25 interviews. The truth is, after your 12th interview, whether you're doing this in person or virtual, it's the same toll on the applicant. It's a lot. So we thought it's very important as we're experimenting to actually prove that our hypothesis is correct, or to make sure that we're not doing any unintended consequences. Moving on to the standardized letter of evaluation, which I would give credit to emergency medicine because they came up with it many years ago. The one major difference that we did in our letter is that we did it criterion-based, because as we move to competency-based medical education, we want to stop people comparing students to other students. So we gave them criteria, and we said, you know, where do they meet that criteria? And we're very proud that it's criterion-based, and our prelim studies from the SLO actually does show that it's more equitable than other letters, which we all know there's plenty and plenty of data that shows you the bias in the LORs, and how the letter is probably more a reflection of the letter writer than the student, because some of us are better at writing letters, honestly, than other people. And now with ChatGPT, can't even tell who's writing the letters. And in the last year, in 2024 match, because we want to make sure, one of the things that we track is, are all our applicants able to obtain that standardized letter? And we're getting there, and we hope that this year, actually, it's going to be higher than this. It continues to be challenging for IMGs to get a standardized letter, and we do tell our program directors that, and many of them they might have already been through residency otherwise, but this is something that they're aware of. Now, when the other thing that we wanted to do is, as we go away from best program, best applicant, we wanted to actually help our applicants, because I always say to you, how do I know where to apply to? So we wanted to create a tool that is not the Doximity rating or the US World and News Report, where actually programs tell you what their priorities are, what they're looking for, and the applicant comes and does a self-assessment. So along with the AMA FRIDA program, we actually created this alignment check index where the applicant is able to input. This is just for them. The programs don't see it. They input some information about them, and they answer some questions. And this is what it gives them. It actually gives them a map view and also a list view of programs that most align with what it is that they are bringing to the program. And we found that 30% of users told us they actually found programs they didn't even know they existed before, and 25% applied to programs they would not have applied to before, and 17% of them placed signals. So when you really, those numbers might look small, but this is huge, because, you know, those students they're seeing programs that they never saw before, and those programs align more with what it is that they are bringing to the program. And this was very important for program signaling. So one of the things that we found is that program signaling has existed forever, if you really think about it. Program signaling existed in the sense of, I call my friend and I say, hey, Rena, I have this great student applying to your program. Can you please look at them? And people like me, I tell you, I know a lot of people across the country. It's just not fair, because I can call my friends, but another student at another place where they don't have Mahmoud calling her friends around the country, it is not fair. But what we also found, which was even more disturbing than this, is that applicants of certain backgrounds, like white applicants and Asian applicants, were more likely than Black applicants or Hispanic applicants to reach out to the program themselves, or to ask a faculty member to reach out on their behalf. So there was a lot of equity issues. And anytime you have an informal process, that's where you have to question the equity. And we actually published this in JAMA Network Open. It's actually very interesting about this communication. And we keep tracking communication now, because even after the signals, we found that some applicants are still trying to do that, but we don't think it makes that much of a difference, because OB-GYN is very competitive and all the spots fill pretty quickly. But also it's something that, you know, anytime there's an informal process, we need to formalize it to make sure that it's equitable for our applicants. When it came to program signaling, our specialty decided to use what we call two-tier signaling. I'm going to tell you the history of signaling, why we chose to do that. So in 2021, ENT, actually, we did not create signaling. We created two-tier signaling, but not signaling. ENT decided to do, they learned from the economy literature that when you have a lot of applications that you'll want to be able to communicate, I'm really interested in your program. So they did five signals. And then the following year, dermatology, general surgery, and internal medicine also did some signals, and auto went down to 4 signals. So when we looked at the data from those first 2 years, what we found is that actually that number of signals continues to increase applications. It did not affect the application. It might have helped programs know who to focus on, but the number of applications kept going up. So the following year, we decided to do the two-tier signaling. And I remember having a conversation with the person in charge of orthopedic surgery. We were talking about high number of signals. And she goes, what do you think about 30? I said, that sounds great. Let's do 18, you do 30. Let's see what happens. Because we believe that a high number of signals, we all call it kind of a soft cap. And I don't know that it's a soft cap more than the applicant is applying. And they say, well, wait a minute, I'm number 18. Do I really want to apply to number 19? Or I'm number 30, do I really want to apply number 31? And then you can see the following year, more people did the two-tier signaling. And this year, there's a lot of people who are doing signaling, and you can also see a lot went to the high levels of signals because of that reduce in the number of applications. And what we found is the reason that we did two-tier is because we used the 3 to kind of imitate what ENT did, and because of the literature from economy. But also we wanted, like I said, we actually looked, and the reason we chose 18 specifically, we looked historically. We looked at NRMP data, we looked at AMC data and applications, we looked at match outcome data to see how many places an applicant needs to apply to or interview at in order to match. And that's how we came up with the 18, because truth is, people say, well, I need to have 12 interviews to match. The only reason you need to have 12 interviews to match is because a lot of interviews being handed. If tomorrow double the interviews get handed out, that number is going to go up. If less interviews get handed, that number will go down. So there's a reason why that number is, because it's a reflection of the interviews that are being handed out. But what we found in our own data, in our own CREOG data and the AAMC data, is that there's a very low chance of getting an interview if you did not signal. And the gold signal meant more than the silver signal in terms of interviews. And, people always say, my students ask me, should I give gold or silver? And honestly, I think it depends on the program. If I'm a program that gets a lot of gold signals, I might not need to look at the silver signal, or I might look at a few. So it depends on the individual program. So it's not one answer for all. And this is for our OBGYN data. You can see that in US 2023, we were averaging almost 75. And for the first time ever, we saw our numbers decrease to 67, 62, and to 75 for IMGs when we look at applications per applicant. So that was the first year in 2024 that we found a decrease. And this year, it was very similar to last year. So we did decrease the number of interview applications per applicant, but not as much as those specialties that went to the high number of signals, like ENT and dermatology saw probably a 40% drop. We only saw about 15% drop. So we continue to talk about that. And then if you look at this year's data, all applicants for IMGs went down to 142, and for US graduate, it went down to 73. What we are learning is that the IMGs are probably less sensitive to signaling because they don't really know where to apply. So they apply, there's a lot for them at stake. And as you know, IMGs constitute 25% of our workforce. And I really think a lot more work needs to happen there, because we could do a lot better at actually telling them where their application is going to be reviewed. And this is where transparency comes in. And we hope to continue to see those numbers drop down year after year as people getting used to what the signaling is, and maybe becomes a norm without signals that you don't have to apply to more than 30 programs. And I like to show this slide, and you don't have to read all of it, but what I like to show about it, that if you look at the mean number of signals received by specialty, you can see that the minimum and the maximum can vary a lot. One of them that I like to point out is internal medicine. The minimum was 9 signals received, and the maximum was 1,522. So you can see and this was last year, you can see it's not even. This was last 2024. So when people use a small number of signals, you see some programs that receive very, very high number and programs that receive a small number. And here I put it by standard deviation. Internal medicine has the highest standard deviation in mean number of signals received by specialty. And it's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to see the data from this year because, as you know, internal medicine went from 7 signal to 15. And that is supposed to actually distribute it more evenly. So it would be really interesting to see when the data comes. And the other thing that I like to show here is the percent of signals that go to top 10%, the percent of the top 10% signals where they go. And you can see in internal medicine last year, 31% of the top programs receive 10% of the signals. And what you will see is that specialties that use the higher number of signals, you start to see where they're actually less of the top programs receiving signals. And I just randomly drew a 20% here. It really is random, but you really want to try to actually, like in dermatology, only 16% of signal went to the top program, to the top 10% programs. You want to be able to distribute those signals more evenly, and that happens with a higher number of signals, not the lower number of signals. Because with the low number of signals, everyone wants to apply to the top what they consider as the top programs, Productimity and US World News Report. I'm going to switch a little bit to talk about readiness for residency. And this is honestly, this is a part that I'm very proud that we're working on. We have committed to training one coach at every single program in the country. And when we first started this out, only 16 programs completed it, then 80, then we had over 200 sign up in 2024 and about 150 individuals completed. So we wanted to have a coach that is coaching the students once they match and coming into residency following this curriculum. So we have a curriculum that was developed based on what we did a needs assessment and what are some of the things. And what you see here, actually, the needs assessment showed that it's not about knowledge that program directors are saying our applicants need more help. It's more about time management, about learning, about how they set their priority, about well-being. So even though this is a OBGYN curriculum, it can actually be applied to any specialty. And we've had other specialties ask us about it as well. And the idea is once students match, then that one-on-one, that coaching begins. And a lot of places it's a faculty member, a couple other places it was actually the program manager who wanted to do it. And you help them build communities before they come because they get to know each other. You do it in groups, and then that coaching will continue one-on-one as once they get into your program. Because we all know that the first 3 months of residency, that's the highest suicide rate for our residents that join, unfortunately, and we are really trying to target that transition and make sure that their needs are met and that their well-being is met. And again, we published, we probably have about 25 publications around our work. And like I said, any initiative that we do, we publish because we treat it like any other study that we're doing. And if something is working, we continue to do it. And if it doesn't work, we need to make changes, we do the same. And this shows you a little bit of a map of the top part is when OBGYN did an innovation, and the bottom part is the other specialties. Many of you remember that the Coalition of Physician Accountability put out their UGRC recommendations at around that time in 2020. And then most of our work focuses on a lot of these UGRC recommendations, and you can see how other people started using the standards. There are 8 specialties that used them last year. I have not looked at this year to see how many, but I think it's more because we do think those standards actually did show in one of our studies that they decrease the applicant anxiety. You can see that the standardized letter of evaluation, it's a lot more than 5 specialties that are now using it. And we hope, and we actually, I think we saw emergency medicine might be migrate toward criterion-based. And I think it's great for people to do more criterion-based as we move towards CBME. But this is my slide to brag that when we do something in OBGYN, we see other people actually picking it up and doing it, which means we're doing good work. And we really appreciate the funding from the AMA to allow us to do this and to do this good work that is spilling across other specialties. This is, I don't expect you to read this, but this shows all the 32 recommendations that came out from the UGRC, and it shows you what we've done and what we continue to do. And as we actually looked at where we want to focus on, we found that one of the areas that we had not done much change in was the actual application. And also we found that our work has been limited a little bit by what was present in ERAS and other applications, because we wanted to go to holistic review, which is obviously one of the important ones. And this was a major reason why ACOG decided to go to the new application system. And I'm going to show you some of the things that are different. And it also allows us to have our own data very quickly, which is huge to have your own data quickly, because you want to be able to be able to make changes as you see things happening quickly. We don't have to go back for data, but more importantly, it's what we're able to do through it. So we want the holistic application review was one of the most important thing. We also wanted to do cost reduction for students. So we did set our prices lower, per application. And you might recall, I don't know how many of you tracked this, but last year when we announced the reduction for our application, not even 2 weeks later, AAMC announced ERAS that the number went down also for how much they're charging per applications. And I tell you, our team was congratulating each other. We're like, we can stop now. We already made a huge difference. Like, no, we need to continue working. It was really nice to see that there was also a response there. And we wanted to have one platform for the entirety of the interview season because it allows you actually to study things better. And we wanted to reduce burden on everybody. And like I mentioned, is data analytics. There are multiple portals, and I'm going to show you those different portals, but I wanted to show you what our holistic modeling looks like. So as you know, there was a lot of articles that were published around how program directors choose students based on the step scores, or they rank them by grades or whatever it is. So we actually put a lot of focus groups together. We did a lot of study of the literature, and we looked at the holistic review models, including the AAMC holistic review model that exists. And we have 7 domains that our applicants get evaluated in. And you can see under all these domains, there are multiple subdomains. And the one that we're very proud of that's different, that did not, there are 2 of them. There's the competencies, and there's also the background and lived experiences. Because a lot of people said, well, I want to know the students who have distance traveled. And we included non-medical work experiences because we all know students who probably held a job all through undergrad, working at McDonald's, or I worked at a gas station in undergrad, and that would never come through in their application, because you can have 20 experiences and the student will go and they will put the 1 day they spent in student-run free clinic, and they won't put the 5 years they had holding a steady job to be able to support themselves, because they think that's not important to us. But it is important to us because we want to know who those people are who actually put themselves through things. So this background lived experiences is a really something that we're very proud of, because it asks some specific questions around that. And this is what it looks like on the program director side. So a lot of times program directors it takes a long time to read a whole application and to understand the applicant. So we pull those metrics out of the application, and they can put weights on these domains. And those weights, as you can imagine, match the ACI, because the student also knows that they're supposed to know what the program is looking for. And so if you're a program who puts a lot of importance on on distance traveled, you will put a higher weight on background lived experiences. But also, if you're somebody who puts a lot of emphasis on academic metrics, you can do that. But if you notice in the academic metrics, we don't have grades and we don't have step scores. And we did that intentionally because as we talk holistically, we think that it's important to pass your clerkships, it's important to pass your courses. And so it's pass fail that we have put here, because we know that there's a lot of bias in grading. We have our own study from the University of Michigan that we did across our core clerkships, which I mean, I feel so bad when I say this, and the students in the audience, I don't know if there are any students there today, but we found that more than 90% of the grade is due to the person who actually is grading the student, not the student themselves, not their ability. So it's actually like, it was a very complex study, but we're like, there's a lot of bias in grades, as we know. And then there's also studies on step scores that show you the inequities there. So we wanted to communicate the message to our programs that these things are not as important as people have typically put emphasis on. And what you notice in this, it makes it easy, right? Because it makes it easier for a program director to set those and to see how they come through the holistic scores. And they can still look at every applicant and see where they collected the most point in the holistic scores. And they can vary it from year to year, right? So this year I might be looking for more people with teaching experience or more people with research experience, and I can change it next year as long as we're transparent with the applicants, what we're looking for, so it can help them place our signals. And what we hope next year, what people will be able to do is also use data analytics to see, okay, if I use my last year's because there'll be AI can actually help you say, based on last year's application, this is who you interviewed and this is who matched in your program. So theoretically, AI can tell you, if you want to interview 70 students, it can immediately tell you, these are the 70 students you interview based on last year's data. But we don't want people to do that, because you know what? This is how bias goes from year to year. Because if I had bias in my last year's selection and I use the same thing that I used last year, it actually will show me that. So we're hoping that people are going to use data analytics and AI to more tell them where their biases are. Because if you think, okay, I'm not choosing students based on their step score, it actually is going to draw for you how important your step score was in your selection. And you'll be like, wait a minute, I thought it wasn't affecting me, but it is. So we're trying to use AI in a way that is actually responsible and a way that helps programs become less biased, not more biased. And then so they can look at the AI model, they can look at the holistic model and see the variations and ask themselves questions. Why did I choose this applicant versus this other applicant? Just few screenshots of what it looks like. The applicant portal is very easy, very friendly to use, and our applicants have told us that already. It has four areas. You know, there's so many ways you can ask the address and the academic history, but the program materials is where things can vary from one to one. The other thing, it's mobile friendly, and this shocked me. Maybe this is why I knew I was too old. I was told that 90% of applicants actually access their application on a mobile device, because when the company said this mobile friendly, I'm like, who cares about mobile friendly? They said, just because you don't use your mobile for that doesn't mean that applicants don't. And I bet you this is very important probably to our IMG population, because a lot of them have more access to mobile than they do sometimes to big computers. The recommendation portal is very straightforward. And then what's really nice about what we did is we integrated the SLO into the application. So it's data fields. One of the things in the UGRC recommendation is that the dean's letter is also integrated like this. So the dean's letter should actually not come in a PDF. It should come in domains like this. And so it's easier to figure out what's happening there. And we're like, no, we got to do one thing at a time. Imagine if we forced all the deans to actually enter things like that, we would not be popular. So we're just going to wait, even though it's a UGRC recommendation, we'll wait till they ask us to do that, because we don't want to put more work on them. Although it should be easy to pull things, we should be able to find ways where actually that dean's letter directly pull into here, but that's going to take a little bit more work. The residency program portal, it's very easy dashboards. Last year, when I asked my program director, I said, how many gold signals we got? He goes, hold on. And he disappears for a while and comes back. I said, how many silver signals? He goes, hold on. He disappears and for a while. I said, are you counting by hand? He goes, pretty much, because he had to download the Excel file, look at it from ERS, and then he has to go download it again to look at that. This is like, he's like, this year, I can tell you right away. He goes, even better. I'm going to give you your own access. Don't even ask me. You could just go look yourself. So there's a lot of configurable dashboards. Just like in Epic, you can do your own dashboard. You can do your own dashboard here for what's most important to you. And you can drill down on things. And same with interview management. You can do all the interview based on this. You can do the video interview while you're interviewing the applicant. You can have your scoring form in front of you. So you're not counting on people actually remembering later, and you don't have to chase down your faculty to fill it out. We had our first interview day already, and the program manager was so excited. She's like, I had all the forms when we actually met at the end of the day, and it actually was all summed up in all this, so you don't have to do it manually through Excel and all of this. And then this is the part that I love. It also gives you individual interview statistics. We all know we have hawks and doves. And sometimes, you know, some of us are more difficult graders than others. So sometimes you'd look at an applicant and we're like, why did this applicant get a 5 from this person, but a 3 from this person? And then you can actually see the standard deviations, and you can actually look over time and know who your tougher graders are when they interview. So it actually makes it easier to process what it means when somebody gives a harder grading to when I'm a harder grader all the time. So it actually helps the program director figure that out. And then at the end, you can do your ranking here. I know we used to always do it on a whiteboard and move things around. Now we no longer have to do this. And then you can click at any applicant as people say, well, I don't remember this about this applicant. You can just go open it and you can see what's there. And then it gives you geographic distribution dashboards at the end of the season. And you have your traditional metrics dashboard as you're looking at DEI. And one thing I forgot to mention, like our program does not give the applications to the interviewers. We actually do it kind of blindly. The only thing we give them is their personal statement. And in this system, you can actually set it up that it only lets them see the personal statement, so they don't see the rest of the application, because we don't want people looking at grades and all that. Once we choose people to interview, we know those people are going to be successful in our program, and we just want the interviewer to focus on getting to know them. And this is all this work has been possible by actually this funding that we received, and we continue to work now with CREOG and ACOG at actually looking at things over and over again. And you know, oftentimes we say, why are we doing this? I say we choose to do things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. I'll tell you, there are some days that are harder than others, and because when you do change, it's not easy. But you know, we in OBGYN are used to change, are used to being attacked, whatever it is. But you know, I'll tell you, our community has been behind us 100%. And this is what why I always feel so it's so humbling to see the number of people in our community who are behind this work and how we are actually improving the transition. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we continue to do it. And now we feel with the new application, it's going to give us actually even more data to actually figure out how to improve that transition. And it's all focused, like I said, we always have to focus on our values and make sure that we stick to what those values are. And speaking of values, I always have to show a picture of my family. And the one in the blue dress was her day of the match. And I always have to say that when she was applying, the average anesthesia applicant was applying to about 60 some programs. And I said, no, Nadine, you're only applying to 15. She goes, are you crazy? I said, you know what? I don't just talk the talk. I'm going to walk the walk. You're going to apply to the 15 because that's all you need, but they need to be the 15 right programs. She did apply to 15. I would tell you on match day, I was like, oh my God, what if she doesn't match? What did I do? But thank God it worked and she matched. And I'm very grateful for my family for supporting me through all those days when I'm going crazy with some of this, but it's been an amazing journey, and we continue to do a lot of this work. And I'm very grateful that you allowed me to share this.